Lifestyle Pirates with Big J and Adriano.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Welcome to this week's episode of Lifestyle Pirates with me, Big J, and him, Adriano.
G'day.
We are joined here this morning by a very good friend of ours. We're gathered here today this morning and we welcome the very unique Scott Duncombe from Sydney Funeral Co. Good morning, Squire.
Morning to you both.
How are you?
Morning. Good, thank you.
Is it nice that you're being interviewed today rather than you're standing at the front and normally leading the show?
Yeah, look, I'm not afraid of a microphone, but yeah, it's good to be on the other side of it now. Yeah. So
excellent.
I think.
Yeah, you can tell us afterwards. Well, mate, thank you for coming along. I guess we've known each other for a number of years, and one thing that's always amazed me about you is you're just a man of many, many hats. And the term pivot was very popular last year for obvious reasons, but you've been doing this ever since I've known you and before. So I want to kind of talk about that, and then we will come back to what you're doing, I guess, in the funeral industry, if I can put it that way, and how you're trying to disrupt that and I guess give people a better experience at probably one of the most difficult times of their lives as well. So how the hell did you go from being a PT to the funeral side of things? Like, take us through the layers of the years, the journey. Was it something that you wanted to do consciously? What's it been like?
So I guess it started prior to being a PT. I was in the corporate world, in alcohol, loving it, and then I just had the opportunity to take a redundancy package, which they say you should, take one in your lifetime, when it was really good. And I just went, you know what? I've always wanted to be a PT. I was, running lots and being nice and healthy and fit, and I just thought I'm going to take a gap year and became a PT. So I went and did my Cert 4 and my diploma, and also whilst I was doing that, studied to become a celebrant, an official marriage celebrant. So in that year, got both qualifications, and then went live. I think it was in November 2011, I got qualified and started in 2012 being a marriage celebrant and PT at the same time. And it seemed,
quite busy.
Quite busy it was.
Making the brides look good for the big day. And grooms, by the way, and grooms.
And grooms,
wow,
yeah.
Lucrative.
And, being a PT was not just about, all the different types of exercise. It was actually more about the food. So I'd actually deliver the food to my clients as well as train them.
Oh, wow.
So training is, 15%, food is 85%. So if you're not putting the right stuff in your body, then you're not going to get the results.
Story checks out.
Yeah. And and it was at that time there was no U Foods, there was no HelloFresh, there was two suppliers in Sydney that would supply you with some food that was prepackaged. All you needed to do was just heat it in the microwave, and it was all healthy. But the choices were limited, and you got sick of broccoli and cauliflower and chicken, and then all of a sudden I was like, well, didn't really see how PT could go down this path and continue to go down this path for myself. And then all of a sudden HelloFresh came out and all these other food suppliers came out. So, I was a few years ahead from a food point of view into the PT, and now most gyms and PTs supply all food to their clients. All the options are there for them as well. So that's sort of how I got into the PT and why I got into it as well. It was more from a personal goal point of view. I just wanted to become a PT. Yeah. And did it for a couple of years. It was great.
Yeah, cool. And so taking a step back, because you've got some pretty big brands on your CV. You've worked Campari, Dyson, Accolade Wines. Was that part of what you wanted to do pre? I assume the redundancy you're talking about is from one of these three. Like, how did you get into those spaces? Are you a booze man, or was it just because you've always been that kind of marketing sales game?
Yeah. So been in alcohol since I was 20, starting out at Penfolds Wines, and then just continued through into beers, wines, spirits, a little bit of Nestle in there as well. And I guess from a alcohol point of view, when I got the redundancy, a friend of mine said, hey, have you ever thought about being a celebrant? Because I love to organise events and I love being, up front on microphone. I'm not an actor in any way, but I just love to be, organising events as such. And she goes, oh yeah, because she's up on the Gold Coast and, she's making an extra 90K on the side. And I went, you what? 90K on the side.
Casual.
Yeah, just casual weekend work. And so quickly looked into the stats and facts of being a celebrant, being a male celebrant in Sydney. The average age was 63 of a celebrant in Sydney. The 85% were females, and the males that were in the industry were, well above the average age as well. And I thought if there's an opportunity for a young male celebrant to come into this industry in Sydney, now is the time to do it. The same-sex marriage bill and the whole conversation was in early stages at that point.
Yep.
But I thought if I can establish myself as a celebrant, so when that does come to play and come to fruition, that I would be set up ready to go, as a same-sex celebrant for the LGBTIQ community as well, which just, naturally came into play a few years later, which is lovely to see and lovely to be able to marry anybody.
Yeah, definitely.
And so on the celebrant side of things, you've obviously done the research on the stats and the kind of demographics and stuff. Did you go to weddings and check it out and almost sit there and take notes? Because you're a man of detail.
Yeah. So I guess the main deciding factor of becoming a celebrant was my best mate's wedding to his wife, Lauren, and it was in the Hunter Valley. And I was the MC for the wedding. And the celebrant turned up. He actually rang me half an hour before on his way to the Hunter Valley saying, "Oh, Scott, I believe you're the contact for the day. My PA system, the battery seems to have died. Can you get an extension cord out to the ceremony?" And I was like, I can't remember his name. Let's call him John. John.
Cracking name.
Yeah. We're in the middle of a vineyard. There's no power.
Yeah.
And I don't know what it was, but I had my own PA system for the night before so we could sing and dance. And so we just had to use my PA system for the ceremony. He then said, just before the ceremony begins, "Everyone please turn your mobile phones off. If it rings throughout the ceremony, it's a major disrespect to the couple." So halfway through the ceremony, a phone rang. Guess whose it was? It was his. And it was in his top pocket right next to his microphone. So there was no escaping of where that was coming from.
What kind of ringtone was it? Was it one of those really annoying ones?
Yeah, it was standard old
Tonight's gonna be a good...
No, given the age of him, it was probably more of some...
How embarrassing.
Yeah,
Na, 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 na.
that's it. And so everyone just was like... And it was at that point in time I just went, this has got to be done better. Like, there's got to be a better way of doing this. So from that point on is when I sort of went, I'm going to become a celebrant as well. And my friends, Jack and Lauren, they still say that they're the ones that got me into being a celebrant. I'm like, that's cool, and it probably was.
And walk me through some of the faux pas that you would have seen being a celebrant, because you're up there, you're front and centre. You would have seen a lot. You would have travelled. I mean, I know you've travelled internationally when we could to do some weddings as well. So you would have just done a myriad of different ceremonies.
Yeah, everybody says, what's the best ceremony? I mean, all of my ceremonies are beautiful for different reasons. Whether it be the location, the couples.
So diplomatic.
Yep. And but some of the highlights have been definitely doing family in Provence. Marrying,
nice.
that was hard to handle. Koh Samui as well. On top of the Harbour Bridge. I was the 25th wedding on top of the Harbour Bridge. Where the bride and groom surprised their whole bridal party. They just were taking them on a bridge walk, and then we got to the top, and there it was, and then I married them up on the top. So that was good.
How do the rings work? Because aren't you tied on all the time?
They wore their own rings up, tied to a ribbon around their wrist.
Yeah.
My ceremony had to be laminated and tied to my wrist, and so it was a logistical challenge to get everything up there. So, but it was beautiful, for that purpose. But I mean, it's just the one thing with me is, and BJ, me, like I just have the level of detail that I want to get to, and I need to know every little bit about a ceremony. Whether it be a new venue or whatever, I'll always do rehearsals, make sure that I understand where everything's going to happen, so that the bride and groom can actually just really relax throughout the ceremony. And they do, about 2 minutes in, you can see their shoulders drop because they're like, we're in control. Somebody else is in control here, and that's what they want. That's what they love, and that's why they've chosen me as well.
Yeah. Has anyone ever said no in front of you?
No, because we have the conversation before. So, the conversation is.
To know that.
Yeah, the conversation is. There's a point in the ceremony where I ask your question that starts with, "Do you take blah blah blah?" And your answer is, "I do." And I say to them, "But if you say maybe, or let me think about it, I then need to actually ask you the question again." And then I say, if you say it again, then the ceremony stops and becomes very awkward for all 100 of us because it's a legal question.
Yeah.
You know, and people go, oh, but can people object? I'm like, no, you can't object as a guest either. You know, if you did in the old days, you had to lodge that 24 hours out. You know, now it's actually, no, it doesn't actually account for anything as well. Now, of course, if someone comes screaming down the aisle as an ex-lover or something, you know, you're the father of my child or whatever, of course the ceremony is going to stop, but that's just to remove that person from
Have you
the
seen
location.
that?
No.
Oh.
You've watched so many movies,
Yeah,
buddy.
it's all in the movies. It's all in the movies.
I just wanted to know if it actually did happen. Clearly not.
No.
Life ruined.
No.
Well, what's the most awkward thing? Sorry, I'm just going to, one more thing. What's the most awkward thing that you've seen?
Most awkward. The groom turning up with one sock on. And, you know, because I always
Good effort, mate.
I'm always like, make sure you've got the right colour socks on, make sure, you know, and he goes, you know, his wife to be packed his bag for the cruise that they were leaving on the next. Yep. And I was like, well, you can't stand at the front with one, and it was not even the right colour socks. So he had to have black socks on. He had one white sock on with black shoes, black. Yeah. You know, like just, and I was like, I'm looking around. I'm like, Dad, you're here. Take your socks off and switch. Because we cannot Photoshop that out. That's just wrong on all levels. Yeah. But, you know, it saved the photos. Yeah. And that's what it's all about. It's the photos. So.
Any other catastrophes you want to ask about?
No, I'm good now.
What's been the most random place, actually, that you've held a ceremony? Or I guess the most unique?
Yeah, unique one. The couple came and saw me and they said, we want to do something a little bit different. We want to surprise our family. And we've booked the dining room at Italian restaurant in Waterloo, and I was like, why don't I dress up and be the waiter? And I come in and I go with
Any
two
chance
glasses
to dress up, buddy? Eh?
Absolutely. And I walk in with 2 glasses of champagne and say, oh, I've heard you guys have, you know, got engaged and you're getting married. When's the big day? And they turned around and they said, well, it would be today if we had a celebrant here. And I was like, well, I'm actually a celebrant. Do you want to get married? And then we just broke into ceremony. And the family were just like,
wait a minute.
What's going on here? Like, they didn't know if it was real or not. And it was just like, everyone just couldn't stop smiling throughout the whole ceremony.
That is so cool.
Yeah, and it was good. And good thing is that I've actually done a bit of waitering in the past, so I didn't drop the glass of champagne over the couple.
Very organic.
That would have been awkward.
Did you have the chance to film that?
No, that was, because it was a surprise.
Yeah.
It was a surprise. So.
If it didn't happen on social media, it didn't happen.
Yeah,
didn't happen.
That's right.
So this is interesting for me because you've gone big corporate. You've then taken time off and you've got your word into the PT world, which is what you wanted to do. You've then got this other opportunity, this side gig, which I think a lot of people have this kind of side hustles, or they want to have a bit of a side hustle of the celebrant world. I mean, why was this you just taking an advantage of an opportunity, or were these things that presented themselves to you, or did you eke them out? And were there kind of elements of I don't want to do it because I don't want to fail? I'm just trying to. It's quite a trail that you've been on.
Yeah. I guess from PT moving into the celebrant world, I always wanted to, once I realised that there was an opportunity here to be a full-time celebrant, I was like, okay, I can only call myself young for so long because then I'm going to be that old celebrant, the cranky, bugger at the back. Yeah. So I said, okay, if I give myself 10 years to being a marriage celebrant, then I will transition into becoming a funeral celebrant. Mm-hmm. So that was the journey. And in the peak of being a full-time celebrant, when I was out of the whole corporate world, I'd be doing 120 to 140 weddings a year.
Wow. Whoa.
Okay. Now, and it's doable because that's all you do. You live and breathe, the couples, you meet with them, rehearsals, weddings, all that. And then all of a sudden I picked up a couple of contracts with cruise ships and doing all the weddings on board cruise ships through a wedding planner. And, so that just took me to the next level as well. But they're Tuesday, Wednesdays and Thursdays. So most weddings are Friday, Saturday, Sundays. And then these cruise line weddings would be midweek. So I would jump on board, marry the couple, jump off board, and then the boat would sail away. Now, they would sail away with their bridal party and the likes, but, it was very quick. And there were internationals, interstates, and a few locals as well. So I realised that in the early day that being a celebrant, a full-time celebrant, was actually something that I really enjoyed because every couple, every location, and every story was different. And that was, I guess, what I loved about it is that it is different every day.
And I guess you get the opportunity to really throw yourself in it. There's no chance to look back in the rearview mirror. You've got to be there because you're being paid to be present to do a job.
Yep.
So you almost can't sit there and wonder why.
No, and there's there hasn't been a single ceremony where I'm like, oh, what am I doing here? Like in the corporate world, you'd have those thoughts all the time. What am I doing here? What is my why of being here? But being a celebrant, it's just, this is what I actually love doing every day.
So I'm not married, right? So the job of a celebrant, you see them standing up at the end of the aisle and they marry the couple. What else is the job of the celebrant? Are you supposed to coach them into what marriage is about? Like,
no. So as a celebrant, we're not qualified to talk about marriage counselling.
Okay.
There are professionals that we do recommend for that. We talk them through the very basics of it. The good, the bad, and the ugly, and it's actually a document that we do have to give all of our couples. But for us, it's we just have to verify who they are and that they want to marry each other. They're not in a forced marriage, or they're not underage, or they're not related to each other.
Have you had that?
is that legal?
You can marry your first cousin. So, but
have you had that?
No, I haven't had that. So, but just making sure that from an Attorney General's point of view, we just make sure we've ticked all the boxes to make sure that they are legal and able to be married as well. Yeah. The most awkward ones are, I've been married before, and they get the side look from their partner. It's like,
what?
Yeah, that's not.
Really?
This is not the time to be talking and releasing that news just here.
Yeah,
but
Confessions was on Sunday, dude.
Yeah. And I had one where
that's horrible.
when they hadn't received their divorce certificate. So they both knew, he was married. I'm waiting for the divorce certificate, and they hadn't bothered to get the actual certificate, and it wasn't due to come out for another 3 months. But the wedding was in 6 weeks.
That's a horrible word for it, certificate.
Yeah, you've got to get certified that you're divorced.
I had to get a certificate to get married.
Yeah?
Yeah. So when we were in the UK...
that raises more questions.
It was a really weird experience. So when we were in the UK, because my wife's Australian, we had to apply to get married and get a certificate, which was about £300. So we got the certificate. Then because of that, we had to get married in a registry office. And that was, I'm going to refer to it as a conveyor belt exercise, because we had to have an interview beforehand. Yeah, pretty much. So we had to have an interview. So imagine the bit where you see your wife walk down the aisle and the groom, tends to just be wow, jaw drops to the floor. I was sitting there in this office, not too dissimilar to this kind of layout, where Teresa walks into the room looking delicious. And I'm like, wow. And this woman's like, do you know this woman? I'm like, can you give her name? It's like dissolving. I'm like, have we did all the questions? And this £300 certificate just ripped it up. I was like, and then we were able to get married. But of course, when she walked down the aisle, I was like, I just saw you 5 minutes ago.
Wait, was this just because you wanted to marry an Australian?
Yeah.
Are you sure, mate?
Yeah, and I think there was a religious element to it as well, baptised, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, it was in a registry office, and yeah, very weird. But we didn't get this document. So this thing you walk them through, these questions, like almost this kind of counselling that Adrian
ever
was
before
talking
and
about.
after.
What's some of the questions that you ask?
Oh no, it's just more about statements. So changing a name, the process of changing a name, taxation, any government departments that you're affiliated with, whether it be for HEX or anything like that, and then marriage breakdown. So before marriage, during marriage, and marriage breakdown. So we just talk about that, and it's just to let them know that there are people out there to help them through the good days, the bad days, and everything in between. And that's about all we are qualified to talk about. So
tax. God, that's going to take a sting out of the day, isn't it?
Yeah.
So FYI, she or he have got a big debt. You now got to pay that off.
Yeah, lovely.
Yeah, your debt's my debt. So, yeah.
So do you find more people not changing their names these days?
I mean, there are stats out there about 70% of people do change. The thing that has, I guess, evolved is people and their careers and not wanting to change their name, whether they're a doctor or any medical profession. They're known for their name. So all of a sudden they have to change their name, and then they just have to start their brand. Their brand identity again. But some people just can't be bothered either. So it's because it is
that one.
Yeah, it is a change. And with same sex couples as well, it's like, well, is it which male or which female will change their name? So do they go double barrel? Which has its complexities.
Is that where they have the hyphen and then another name? Yeah.
So you can only change last names. You can't change anything else. Where a lot of people want to get rid of that middle name because, it could be Beatrice or, I love all the
Lovely name.
Beatrice. I love all the Beatrices out there, yes. But, like people just want to drop a name. And I'm like, no, you can't do that. So it's only last name.
Yeah.
You got a middle name?
Yeah, I do. Massimo.
Massimo. Oh, that's beautiful. You got one, Scotty?
Andrew.
Andrew. Yeah. I haven't got one.
You missed out, mate.
Mum, Dad, what the hell?
Bop.
I don't think any of my brothers and sisters have a middle name.
You can add one if you want.
No, I'm good. I'm good.
Mate, what would be your one? Go on.
Oh, there's so many ways you can spell legend, isn't there?
Legenda.
Well, have you got Massimo? Jesus Christ.
I don't think you can get more authentic. Adriano Massimo Giorgi.
Anyway, massively digress. I'm so sorry. So on the training side of things, did you have to do any training as a celebrant? Because you see it on the movies where they go on the internet and they become, authorised in that state or jurisdiction to just say, to take the couple through it.
Yeah.
Did you have to do a similar thing?
So when I did it back in 2011, we had to do a weekend course.
Yeah.
So what I did is I went to the local supermarket, got Weet-Bix, filled in my application on the back of the Weet-Bix box and applied for it and got. So I did have to do a weekend course. It was 2 days and then at the end of it, you then had to go away and do all these modules and case studies and exams and all that. So I knocked it out in about 10 days and then you apply for the Attorney General's Department and then they come back to you and they say, do you really want to be a celebrant? The stats are.
Oh, really?
Yeah. 110,000 brides and grooms get married each year. There are, at that point, I think it was about 12,000 wedding celebrants. So that's, you'll do 10 on average, 10 a year. Do you really want to do that?
Wow.
This is in it's like this
Great
warning
careers
note.
advisor.
Yeah, it's this warning notice as you open the document. It's like not even before you get into it. It's the warning notice.
Wow, the cover letter.
Yeah. And it was like, I'm okay. Like if I can triple that, then I'm, above average and continue from there.
Did you say I do?
That was horrible. I loved it.
So then they also then tell you when your application will be granted on said date. And 2 days prior to that, I was granted, and then 2 days after I became live on with the website and all that, I got my first booking, which was an 82-year-old. Her first wedding, she was dying, and her husband to be. So she was 82, I think it was, and he was 60, late 60s. Been together for 40 years, and she just went, you know what, I want to get married. And I was just like, okay, cool. Whereabouts are you? And she was out in the western suburbs. So went out there, met with them, did the paperwork, had no idea what I was doing.
Awesome.
And for the paperwork, that is. And then all of a sudden on the day, because it was just at home, they put the marquee up in their driveway and it was a 10 a.m. service. 10:30 came, she's not there. 11 o'clock came, she's not there. 12 o'clock, she came. She was not involved, but there was a car accident on the M4 and she was stuck behind it in traffic in the limo. So she had nowhere to go.
Yeah.
And, it was just like, well, and I was like, is this what's going to happen at every wedding? They're going to be like 2 hours late because I need to adjust my fees for this. But anyway, she turned up.
You don't charge overtime?
Well, I do now. terms and conditions per 15 minutes.
First day, learned a lesson.
Yeah. Rookie error.
Hey, if you want to be half an hour late, you be half an hour late.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, so married them, and it's just beautiful. For them, it was just what she wanted. So
That's an amazing story as well.
for my first.
I've got to ask, you see so many different celebrants that they have different styles and stuff like that. How long did it take you to develop your own style, and did you work on creating that style?
Yeah. There are definitely different styles of celebrants. There is your actors, there's your comedians, there's your
Waiters.
Waiters. And it depends on, I guess, the personality of that person. For me, I'm all about, being professional, but having a little bit of light humor as well. And I always say this to all of my couples is that, we'll have some fun, we'll have some laughs, but it's not a comedy show. It's not about me. It's about you two. So, yes, I'll throw in a few dad jokes that Big J has passed on over the years. But it's just all about, picking those moments. And I know where those moments are. And I say to all my couples, my ceremonies are all the same. There's a start, there's the end, there's the legal bits in between. But the stuff between all of that is about you two. And that's how I get it from, the couples, I get it from the bridal party. But I know when the moments are that you can have a a moment, just to let everybody breathe and have a laugh. And I try and do that with at least within the first 2 minutes of a ceremony. And it's always got to do with the giving away with the father or the mother or the parents or both. And that just sort of sets the tone then for everything. So, and I've always said that, you know, a celebrant sets the tone for your ceremony, but also for the rest of your night. If you have a crap celebrant, then everyone's going to talk about it for the whole night, going, "Oh my God, did you see that?" You know, like they'll just
That's
talk
very
about
true.
it. And sometimes when it's a good celebrant, they'll go, "Yeah, that was a great ceremony," and just move on, you know. But others will go, "Wow, that was a really good ceremony." Like you
Sets
just
the vibe.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and that's you know, that's what I've tried to do at every ceremony. Sometimes I don't get much information from couples, so I either make it up. No, I don't. Or I just try and read the room as well. And that's what you got to feel the energy in the room. And you know, for some nationalities, they don't like humour. Some also turn up half an hour late, you know, as guests. So, you know, you've just got to really read the room and, you know, just go with what happens. But with all my information that I get from my couples, I need to know every bit of detail so that I know when something is going to go wrong. I know when it's going to go wrong.
Yeah.
And when you've done as many as what I've done, you know when it's going to, you know the moments that are, you know, going to go wrong. So it's just all about preparing them for it. So I said for the rest of the night, it's over to somebody else.
Yeah.
Unless I'm your MC, then that's somebody else's, you know, responsibility. So.
And do you have a period of kind of reflection after every one to say, well, did I do well there? What have I learned there?
Yeah, if something does go wrong, I reflect on it quite heavily. Whether it be, you know, I mean, we all make mistakes. I know that, but sometimes I get the information that's wrong, and I have no way of checking. And this was in the early days where I get my couples to complete a survey on themselves online, so they get to do it themselves. But one couple, they'd known each other for a long period of time, but not as a couple. He was married previously. But they met through a gym, and then all of a sudden they got divorced, and then they started to date a few years later down the track. So the question was, when did you first meet? Now they put 2012, but they didn't start dating until 2016, which was post-marriage, all that sort of stuff. And during the ceremony, she said, no, it was 2016, and just stopped the ceremony. And I was like, oh, so it threw me a little bit, and I was like, how could I get something so wrong?
Yeah.
And then the next part was, you know, when I start to tell the story a little bit further down in the ceremony, I then said 2016, but it just wasn't making sense when I said 2016 because the story was that they first met in 2012. And that's all I say. Yeah. Not when you first started to date. The reason being was that he was still married. Yeah. And she thought that she was cheating on him. Yeah. Like it was just this awkward date thing. Yeah. And I just you know, afterwards I said, I'm so sorry for mixing up the dates. But the good thing about it is that I had my survey that they completed. Yeah. And they did it right. Yeah. But she misheard and misinterpreted what I was saying. Yeah. But she stopped the ceremony because she didn't want everybody thinking that she was cheating on. Definitely. You know, so it's just like, you know, you got to make sure that you do get it right. And most of the times I get to a ceremony and I'll just double check pronunciation of names, dates, all that sort of stuff, just so I can make sure that I can get through it. Yeah, definitely. And it's 1 in 100 that you would get a date wrong like that, but yeah.
So to move on to your latest venture, and you touched on it because you only had 10 years as a wedding celebrant and then you were going to be an old funeral director. I love the way you just put yourself down. You're now running Sydney Funeral Co. And really looking to disrupt the way that people, I guess, go through that part of their life and families go through their life. Before we get into that, given that you've gone from being a wedding celebrant, which you could argue is supposed to be someone's best day of their life, you're now going to be there on someone's worst day and a family's worst day of their life. From I guess, a headspace and mindset side, did you have to retrain yourself? And did you have to, again, because I can imagine there's similarities, like there's a process of the event. In terms of the way that you delivered and prepared and surveyed, you know, your customers, to put it crudely, did you have to retrain yourself a little bit? Or
the one thing with being a celebrant is it's all about ceremony. So whether it be a celebration ceremony for a wedding or a celebration ceremony for the celebration of life of someone, most celebrants now get trained in both, although probably 85% of a course is more wedding because you need to be officially registered, where anyone can be a funeral celebrant.
Right.
you both now are officially funeral celebrants. I know you didn't want it. I know you didn't want it.
I don't know whether to celebrate that. Can we put that on our CV/LinkedIn
Absolutely,
profile?
absolutely.
Yeah, mate, you're going to update LinkedIn straight after this.
Will do.
So it just means because at a funeral you're essentially an MC, so you aren't just guiding the service as such, but understanding how to be a good funeral celebrant is something that you obviously need to train and master as well. And there are courses out there that do focus on funerals rather than weddings, but at the end of the day, there's a start, there's an end, and there's a storytelling in between, which is exactly the same as a wedding. There's the start, the end, and the storytelling in between. So when I became a wedding celebrant, I'm like, I'm never going to be a funeral celebrant. I'm just going to cry at every funeral. I'm not going to be able to do this, because we all cry sometimes, on TV commercials, and I was one of those people.
The Qantas ones.
Yeah,
They
exactly.
get me
Or the
every time.
pigs. What about the pig that flies away? It's just.
I haven't seen that one.
I don't know the big one.
So I all of a sudden went, you know what, I'm going to, put my toe in the water to see how the funeral space goes. And I got a call from a funeral director in the eastern suburbs, and they said, look, we'd love you to be a funeral celebrant for this family. Look, you don't need to meet them. It's a very small, low-key, private service, which I feel really uncomfortable not meeting a family. But as per the instructions, I called them. We went through the ceremony and went to the service, and all of a sudden the funeral director sprung it on me. It was actually a viewing and an open coffin service. Now, that's next level. If you've never done a funeral before, to be standing next to a coffin that is open, talking about the person that's just there. So I had that moment of, do I show them my surprise, or do I just, go for a walk back outside and come back in, a little bit repose? So I did it, and, I went, I really enjoyed it, but I don't want to do it with the funeral directors, because there's this real, dividing love-hate relationships with funeral directors and funeral celebrants. So I was just like, no, if I get the call, I'll get it, but I'm not going to go out there and market myself and touch base with the funeral directors. So there's a whole story there, but, and it's, and we'll get into it as such, but, it's just the industry has conditioned everybody into doing the way that we do death in Australia.
And what's that for people that are maybe fortunate enough where they've not had to experience? We'll go through that picture. What's the I don't want to use the word norm. What's that conditioning look like?
45-minute service at a chapel, at a crematorium, at a church, whichever. It's just about getting them in and then turning them over. You talked about your conveyor belt for weddings. It's the conveyor belt for funerals. Yeah. And when there's a couple of major players that have majority of the share of the market, then they're going to condition you into a way of doing things. And that's all we know. Like, I've known that from when I was 10, when I went to my grandmother's funeral. It was, a 45 minutes. She disappeared behind some frosted glass and she was gone. But there was no, it wasn't really a ceremony. It wasn't really a celebration. It was just, we've got to do this and we've got to get onto it. Now, what that means is that people are conditioned to make it happen very quick. Yeah. And it's like, hang on a second, your mum's been with us for 90 odd years. Why do we want to finish it with a 45-minute service? Why do we want to rush death? And for various reasons, we can't handle death. We don't like talking about it. We don't want to, prolong the ceremony as such. So there's all different reasons for it. But the industry, I believe, has had a major part into it. And funeral directors are lined up behind you as well, and they're looking in at the door when you're the celebrant, and they're like, you've got 11 till 11:45, of which everyone's got to be out by 11:45. Now, if you've got a congregation of 200 people, it takes 5 to 7 minutes to get them outside. So you're breaking it, and 5 to 7 minutes to get in. So you've really only got a 30-minute potential window of a service. And I just was like, this is not right. This doesn't feel right, And for what funeral directors pay funeral celebrants as well, for the most important part of this whole process, and it's exactly the same for a wedding. A celebrant is the most important person for the day, for that moment. So therefore you pay for what you get. And it's the same with the funerals. You pay for what you get. So the industry was like, well, this is what we pay you. And I always had a problem with people telling me what I'm worth. Yeah. And I'm like, if I'm going to put all the effort and all the love and all the storytelling into this, this is my worth. Funeral directors didn't like that. And they're like, but we can go and get 20 other celebrants that can do it for half the price. We'll go. Yeah. But you're only going to get, a certain style and a certain type of, ceremony. So that was sort of that point I was at where I was like, well, I'm not going to be a funeral celebrant because the industry doesn't pay, but families want this to be a celebration. So we want to do things a little bit different. So there's this, world of, which way I'm going to go and what direction am I going to take here. And then, I got involved in being a funeral director with a previous company, and their objective was to do things differently as well. And I was like, I felt, this is where it should be going, and the direction. And there's a lot of companies now, both in Melbourne, Brisbane, and in Sydney, that are really trying to change the industry, and also are paying celebrants what they should be paid as well. And I truly believe that if you have a good celebrant that gets the family and the stories and all that as well, then it's going to be a beautiful celebration of life, and people aren't going to be sitting there going, all right, when's this going to finish?
Yeah.
And that's what people just don't, what people are doing, and also, I guess what people go into this post-service resentment as well. It's like, we didn't even have time to, do a full eulogy or a full story of a person's life, or, creatively wise, we didn't have time. So, it started to be where you started doing double bookings for funeral services. So you've got 2 time slots so that you can tell more stories. You can have the proper slideshows, you can have music, you can have entertainers, you can have whatever you like. It's just all about time. And that's something that the industry previously hasn't given families, is time. It is all about just quick. We got to get them in, turn them over, and I just find that for death of a loved one, you do need to let them go, but you want to let them go in your own time.
Yeah, so you're spot on. So recently, I had my grandmother's funeral, and it was exactly like that. It was just going through the motions. Here we go. You walk in, you do this, and you walk out, and that's it. It's over. How would you change it? Because it's a very interesting sort of concept, or not concept. I think it does need to change, definitely, because every funeral I've ever been to has been like that, and I'll be honest, they've been shit.
Yeah, and I guess religious, when it's of a religion or a religious ceremony as such, they do have their traditions and their ways of doing it. And I still do the full religious funerals as well. If the family wants us, then we'll do it as well. But what we try and do is just add in other elements as well that mean a little bit special for them. But at the end of the day, we are being controlled by the minister or the priest in terms of his service. But how we do it is we actually sit down with families and say, here's a blank bit of paper. I'm going to give you all the options that are available, and it'll give you time to make a choice. Now, they'll say, oh, we just want to do it at the crematorium. Okay, did you know that we can actually do it at Taronga Zoo? Did you know that we can do it at Sergeant's Mess? Did you know we can do it here at Athol Hall in Mossman? So just giving them the options, or surf clubs. Most wedding venues in Sydney now are doing funerals during the week.
Really?
Because then they're empty spaces. And they're like, if I can get 1 or 2 funerals a week to do the service there and the wake, it's financially, very viable for them to do it as well. So we just give them all the options and then let them choose. We're not affiliated or aligned with any, crematoriums, churches, or the like. So we just are pure independent, and we just go wherever the family wants us to go. Now, if they want to do it in the backyard, we'll do it in the backyard, and we have done it. If you want to do it at Bondi Beach, we'll do it at Bondi Beach. Okay, so it's just all about, instead of saying no, it's like, let's find a way to do this. Now, the councils, I do have a challenging conversation with councils. When I call them and I say, can I book your community centre for a funeral? And the first thing they say is, no, you can't. I'm like, but this is a community centre for the community. Why can't the community use it for a funeral?
Fair point.
Yeah. And that was at a council in the inner west of Sydney. And
that's my council.
And it went up the chain and it came back down as, you're right, this is about the community. So we've got 2 venues out of our 26 that are available now to hold funerals. And that's the wins that I like to get, because if council can start to change, we'll be able to start doing them in parklands, on, bushlands, community centres, and where family and community can come together to have a service. So we're not forcing them to the crematoriums or to a chapel or whichever. It's just about giving them the options.
And what's people's responses when they hear of these options? Because I think you're right. I mean, I'm probably quite fortunate. I've not been to too many in my life, which I'm quite happy about that. But yeah, I have a stereotypical view of what a funeral would look like and where I would go and what everyone's wearing. So what's people's kind of feedback to you when they go, I didn't know I could do that? Like,
that's it. That's their response. Wow, I didn't know you can do that. So it is because people want, in the past, people wanting to hide death, and it should only be at a crematorium or a chapel or a church, and it's quite funny when you think about the church itself. Monday to Friday, funerals. Saturday, Sunday, weddings. So why can't we do that in every other venue that has weddings? And some venues go, I can't have funerals here because I have weddings and it would scare off all the brides. I'm like, what about the church? They do it.
Yeah.
They're okay. So it's just about giving them, just challenging either venues, councils, families to say there are other options out there. Okay, so, we don't have to do this in 3 days. We can do it in 10 days. Like, let's gather your thoughts, gather the community to come together to pull together the best send-off for your loved one. And that's the most important, because then they can actually breathe. If you got to do something in 3 days, like a funeral, you do not breathe, you do not relax for those 3 days. And then you go into the post-funeral, remorse and it's like, oh, I should have done this. I didn't do that. I didn't say that. Because I just didn't have the capacity to be able to think about anything outside of what I've been conditioned to do.
So along with the traditional terms of venues and how and the time, are you challenging the financial side of things as well?
From a financial point of view for a funeral, again, the industry has, and it's been well documented that, there are some inexpensive ones and some really expensive ones. And that's sometimes within the same company. And the process is all the same. So somebody passes, goes into mortuary, prepared, coffined, then service. So, you can range from $5,000 to $15,000 for exactly the same service. Now, as a consumer, some people like to think that they can go out and do some research, or some people just go to their first one. Okay, so it's total, from a consumer point of view, it's about their capacity to be able to do any research. When somebody has passed, their capacity is dropped down and they just, they don't have the capacity to be able to make an informed decision. So, what we do is we have a very open and transparent pricing model, which the government has forced on the industry in the last 12 months. Now, some funeral directors have taken up that and being transparent in their pricing. Others are still holding it behind closed doors. There will come a day where it actually has to be, you'll be fined, or deregistered as such. That unless you show your pricing, then you won't be able to trade. And that's actually happening as we speak. There's massive discussions going on around the pricing for the funeral industry. And my website has every single bit of pricing. You don't need to be a science or a mathematics, have a mathematics degree to work out the pricing of my funerals. It actually says it there, and it actually subtotals it as well. So the families know exactly what they're paying for.
I liked that part on your website, actually. It was very transparent. There was, again, to your point around, and again, let's just go with the conditioning around, you've got 3 days to get this sorted. Yeah. One can imagine you could be hoodwinked into spending a lot of money, quite quickly, because your emotions are all over the place. You would assume that your relative, family member, loved one wants the very best of everything, but your website was very transparent in terms of what things were, which would give, I think, a lot of clarity and comfort in a strange time as well.
Yeah.
So 10 points to that.
And I also think when people go, oh, mum would want the best coffin, I actually say no. Would she? Like, why? Especially if it's been cremated. Why spend $3,500 on a coffin when we can spend $360 and it's still a beautiful timber veneer, coffin, as opposed to $3,500 when it's been cremated? Like, let's, if you want it and you've got it, that's okay. But I always challenge a family when they say, oh, mum would only want the best. Yeah, she probably would, but she probably want the best champagne.
Yeah.
You know, not the best coffin.
Yeah.
You know, so it's just all about, challenging and being open with our pricing as well. You know exactly what you're paying for. So if the flowers cost me $200, that's what the family pays. The coffin is $360, that's what they pay. We just have our fixed service fee down the bottom. And it varies based on the type of service that we can provide in terms of, direct cremations, full service or full service and wake. But you know exactly, and it's fixed and it's locked away.
So how do we raise the awareness or raise the conversation around death? I was impressed is not the word I want to use, but I was intrigued, I guess. So obviously Prince Philip has very recently passed away, and they were talking in the press that he had planned his Land Rover or Range Rover that he was going to be driven away in like 9 years ago. So, and again, that was I think a very flippant comment by the media, but I was quite intrigued by someone thinking that far ahead to go, this is what I want to be driven out in when I pass.
Yeah.
So how do we raise the conversation? I guess take the taboo out of it and make people feel comfortable around talking about this. And
there's definitely a variety of organisations out there that are talking about death, whether it be the Groundswell Project, whether it be Dying to Know Day, which is in August. It's just all about
what's Dying to Know Day?
Dying to Know Day is literally let's talk about death.
Right.
So there's death cafes have taken off around the country and around the world as well. So
what?
Death cafe. So you go in and you take over a cafe, and it's a group of like-minded people that get together and just talk about different ways of death, whether they're from the industry or they just want to learn more. And they'll have experts coming in as well, and just to talk about it, because just by talking about it doesn't mean you're going to die either. It's just like if you talk about being pregnant, you're not going to get pregnant. But people think if I'm going to talk about death or my death, I'm going to soon die. So they just put it to the back of their mind and not going to talk about it. There's also a lot of feedback, and families say, I'll just let the kids take care of it. And it's just like, why? Why put your kids through that? Why not give them a list of what you want? And here is the coffin, here is the type of flowers, here's my favourite song, because quite often people don't know what people's favourite songs are. Now, if you're young and you can go into their Spotify playlist and you can see which is their most played one, you'd think that would be it, but sometimes it's not. So it's just about actually having the conversation with family. And, there are lots of community groups out there as well. And, we're preparing a bit of a roadshow, hopefully which will get approved by the City of Sydney to be able to go around and talk about it. So actually invite people in and talk about the options and talk about what does your death look like, and how do we do this, and where can you do it? Just so that people are aware, so they can then go and spread it. I think the last 4 years that I've been as a funeral director as such, the conversation has doubled, tripled. There's a lot more conversation happening out there, but there needs to be a lot more.
Well, on that note, can we talk about your TV pilot?
I guess so.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we, where do I start? So in New Zealand, there's a show called Casketeers. There's in the US, it's called 6 Feet Under. And I've always thought, how, can that happen in Australia? And, if the opportunity ever came up, I'd jump at it. Yeah. And I got a phone call from a TV production company, and before I even finished saying the sentence, I said, I'm in. So we've done a pilot. When it's not the pilot as such, we've done what they call the sizzle reel, which is to go and sell it to all the networks. And it's really exciting. So it's going to be called, at this stage, everything is, still in draft format as such. But at this stage, it's going to be called Over the Rainbow. And it is going to be focusing on the LGBTIQ community as well. Because our community hasn't really been well looked after in the funeral space. And as soon as I say that, people's eyebrows go, oh, what do you mean? And I'm like, well, if you have a religious funeral director that is looking after somebody in the LGBTIQ community, there's just not that comfortable rapport that can build straight away. Whereas if you sit across the table from somebody from your community, whether it be, sexual, religious or whichever, you're actually a lot more comfortable and you can actually have the conversation with them as well. And nobody does that in Sydney. There's a couple of funeral directors that are gay friendly or, LGBTI, allies, and which are great. But it's actually, there's no standalone business that actually does it. So from the TV program, we also have another brand which will be called Over the Rainbow Funerals. And that is just really to look after our community as such, so that we can, give people respect in our community, because sadly all I hear from our community is just send me off in a cardboard box, direct cremation, I don't want anything. Because they don't want to go to the church. They don't want to go to a chapel. They don't want to go to a crematorium. They still want to have the massive big party, but they don't want to have the celebration of a service or a ceremony as such, because the industry hasn't, welcomed.
It's so rigid and traditional.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So while it's caught up on the wedding side, it's not caught up on the funeral side. Is that what I'm hearing?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep. So, all the funerals that I've done for our community, it has been, what do you want to do? We did one recently where the family came to us, and it was a rainbow family, and she sadly drowned down on the south coast, trying to save her 10-year-old son. So she passed, and the family were from Queensland, but her other family is all in Sydney here as well. And I said, what do you want to do? And they're like, well, we'd love to do it in Byron Bay. And I'm like, okay, haven't done one in Byron Bay, but, everything's possible. And then it was like, no, we'll do it back in Sydney at Taronga Zoo. Oh, no, we'll go back to Byron Bay. Anyway, we ended up doing it in Byron Bay and Taronga Zoo at the same time. And we simulcast live stream down to the Taronga Zoo. And we had the funeral service up in Byron Bay at the theatre. And at that stage, 150 was the max. For funerals, it was in a theatre, and it was a beautiful stage show for this beautiful lady. And, I had a team up there with me. I had a team here in Sydney doing that as well. And we then rang the local police and said, can you give us an escort from the theatre to the crematorium? And if you've been to Byron Bay, there's one road in, one road out, and it's always blocked. So the police literally shut down the town and gave us a full escort out of town to the crematorium, which was about a 45-minute drive. The family loved it because it was exactly what she would have wanted, a true celebration, a little bit of theatre, but not over the top. But there was, and the other complexity to this was that she was also deaf. And so there was majority of the congregation were deaf. So we had interpreters there whilst everyone was speaking, or if they were deaf and they were doing a speech, then would have to have all the interpretations. So you have this multiple layers of communication that was going on for a service. Whenever I met with the family, I had an interpreter here. Do you know what I mean? It was beautiful to be able to do. But I don't know too many funeral directors that would have been able to take that on.
Yeah.
Traditional funeral directors.
I mean, my eyes glazed over a little bit there when you were telling that story, just because I'm quite an emotive cat for someone of my stature. How do you, I guess, compartmentalise? How do you just turn up, do what you're there? Because you're not a cold character. You're a very warm and loving character. How do you engage, but then I guess process and move on? And or do you take it like, and has that evolved over the multiple ceremonies you've done? So like at the start, did it really affect you? How's that changed now?
I guess it's the ones that are tough, no matter who you are, will affect you. Suicides are just absolutely terrible. The start of this year, the first 10 funerals that I did, I think 8 or 9 of them were suicides, all males, under 50, post-Christmas, post-New Year. So that, hits home because that's my age group, and they were both from, LGBTIQ community to, straight community as well. So, the suicides are the heavy ones. Babies are very heavy as well because there is just sometimes no answers, or it was an accident as such. And in the early days, I read somewhere or I heard somewhere, it's the family's grief. The moment I take on their grief is the moment that'll just do me over as such. So I'm there, and I will still, have tears, and I'll still, struggle to sometimes get through a ceremony, but it's about, at the end of the day, it's their grief. and I'm just there to help support them and to get them through this little tight passage called a funeral service, and to be able to let them do what they need to do and grieve, but I just need to take everything away from them. So all the organising of every little bit, and that's what I say to them: just tell me what you want. We'll do it. The team will do everything for you. You've had complete say on it, but I just want to take it away from you, because I don't ever want a family being at office works the night before, photocopying booklets, because it's been delayed. I'm like, that just causes and compounds so much stress for the day that they actually don't take in what's happened at the day. So my whenever I am doing a ceremony, and I don't know how to explain this, but when I am talking and I am feeling a little bit overwhelmed by it all, I actually pause for that half second to get me through the next part. It's really weird, and I don't know if it's a technical term or I've just mastered it, but it just allows me to actually stop from breathing as such. Yeah, it's really weird, but I can then get through it. So, I did a service for a man that did take his life, and we had 750 people at a golf club.
Wow.
Now,
popular chap.
Very popular in the Greek community. So one was out of the church. So that was, an interesting conversation.
Is that because it was a suicide?
Yes and no. But, for most suicide ceremonies, I somehow in the ceremony include, are you okay? Like, these are three powerful, words that we sometimes use, and there's obviously the campaigns out there, but it's just so powerful to be able to bring that into a ceremony to make sure that anybody else out there, if you are struggling, like, you need to, try and ask for help, but also we need to be watching out for people as well. Sometimes people say some things and you're just like, hang on a second, I'm going to replay that in my head, and then I'll go back and ask them the next day. Hang on a second. You said something to me the other day I wasn't really comfortable with. Are you okay? So it's just little things like that. But, that getting back to the question about how do I deal with it, it is the more you do, the more you become controlled over your feelings. And, for me, it's an event that I make sure that happens perfectly. So it gets back to the wedding days of, if something goes wrong, you then think about it, reflect on it, and I do the same for the funerals. If something hasn't happened, I reflect on how that didn't happen or why that didn't happen, or, but at the end of the day, it hasn't fallen over, and the services still happen, the family's still happy. But, it's just all about just reflecting on your own, I guess, life, and you go, hang on, things aren't that bad.
Yeah. So on that note, when we started this podcast, you spoke about you being the host. You like to put on an event. Did little Scotty Duncombe from school ever dream about being a funeral director?
No, my career was a policeman, take after my father. And then, and that's all I studied for when I was at school. And then all of a sudden I realised that, no, that's not what I wanted to get into. But did I ever think I was going to be a funeral director? No. Did I ever think I was going to be a wedding celebrant? No. But just, the way that with my career and where I was in life, it actually just worked out perfectly. Yeah. If I could be a funeral director 20 years ago, I may not have been mentally ready, but I wish I was, because it is such a great job to be able to guide a family through such, sometimes traumatic circumstances or natural, and also a couple, to get them through that day as well. It's just about taking control of their event to making sure that it is perfect for the wedding or for the funeral. And there's not too many funeral directors that are wedding celebrant as well. That's all starting to change. But the one common thing with all of us celebrants is it is ceremony, whether it be funeral or a wedding. And that's what, you've got to keep remembering who you are. You're there to deliver a ceremony and to make sure that their loved one or the couple, their story is told.
Love it. Well, mate, we're going to wrap up here because I think you've got a bit of work this afternoon as well.
Just wait, one question.
Oh.
How many suits do you have?
And do you get discounted?
Pre-COVID, during COVID, and post-COVID. Yeah, I've got them all different sizes. All different sizes. Yeah. Look, and it's really important to, make sure that you don't stand out with suits as well. Like for funerals, we have our standard traditional black ones. blue ones, chinos as well. But for weddings, it's also making sure that I don't stand out and match or clash with the bridesmaids or groomsmen or anything like that as well. So lots of ties, suits, and but the one common thing is I have a nice, bright, shiny pair of patent shoes.
Oh, nice.
He looks the part. Well, mate, so I'm going to ask my question. Oh, do you want to ask it this week?
No.
No? Okay. All right. You got a table booked for 4. You can have 3 guests. Who would they be and why? And they can be dead or alive.
I'd have to say, from a comedian point of view, Jeannie Little. I would have loved to, have met her. I've just recently done her funeral, so just the character that she was. Tough one. Matthew McConaughey, just
Nice.
to look at.
I just want to hear his voice.
Yeah, it's just that southern drawn accent, and you'd have to go Channing Tatum. So sorry.
I love Angus is going to listen to this and go, "Where's my what?
Oh no, he
where's
knows.
my invite?"
He knows.
He knows.
Yeah.
I love that. Love it.
So
Awesome.
how can people get a hold of you?
So from our website, sydneyfunerals.com or scottthecelebrant.com. They're my 2 websites, and obviously on social media as well. But just based in Darlinghurst down here in Sydney, and have a nice little office just next to a bunch of restaurants. So, yeah, it's good.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for coming on. Really
Thanks,
enjoyed
guys.
it.
Thank you.